I have a proposal, a theory I'm just going to throw out there, and it's me floating stuff out in the ether only as alt media people can, because we stand between this place of credibility and non-credibility that we can kind of just speculate out in the ether, and nobody can look down upon it. It's just pointless speculation, okay? It was just something said on the podcast. So I want to throw something out there, and it's that Trump, to me, is looking more and more like an American Putinist. From the way he behaves, from the way he speaks, from the allies he makes, and from the way he looks and values other countries' sovereignty. And so I'm gonna lay it out for you guys quickly, okay? First off, let's talk about Vladimir Putin, okay? First thing about Vladimir Putin that is very clear is, if you look at his background, is that he is quite involved with organized crime. In fact, you could say he is very involved with organized crime. In fact, he has been able to merge the state and organized crime in many fashions. He also is a big friend of oligarchs, big business, but not a big friend of the press. In fact, you could say he's even kind of a bit of an opponent of the press due to the fact that they sometimes have different interests, because the press want to hold him to account and Putin doesn't want to be held to account. And so he creates his own press, supports his own press, and has the state fund or manufactures his own press that is favorable to him. He is somebody who does not value the sovereignty of other countries really all that much, especially if it in any way overlaps with any interests that is in his mind, important to the national security of his nation state or his imperial goals. He likes to establish his own truth that is separate from necessarily something that is detectable or testable, but something that aligns with his narrative, something that can be shipped out by his state media apparatus. And he will recruit many hooligans and many times criminals, and we can just say either undesirables or less than reputables when it comes to moral character, in order to help him manufacture that separate reality, whether it be in the legal system or it would be in the media space, right? Okay, so these are all things that I think you could say apply to Putin, right? I mean, when it comes to, like, for example, when it comes to creating an alternate space and legal space, just look at any time there is somebody who's accused of a crime in Russia, like, for example, like threatening national security, and it's because they, like, put some posts on social media that were critical of the war. So, like, you can create whatever you want in order to, whatever story, whatever narrative you want, in order to put that person away for a long time. You look on state TV, you'll see crazy, wacky stories about Satanists or whatever it is over in Ukraine, and that's why they need to go fight. Wacky, wacky stories, creating their own reality. Now, if I go over to Trump and I'm looking for layover, right? I'm looking for areas that they show similarities. One area, and this is why I have this article up here, and this is one of the main reasons I wanted to talk about today's little rant on Putinist Trump, is the use of criminals and undesirables in public PR stunts and, let's just say, dirty activity being embedded with these types. Now, it's not that Trump and Putin are the only ones, but this is definitely something that they're both a little bit known for. Whether it be all of Trump's fellows who have been indicted and then maybe even served some time behind bars because of their behavior. We could talk about any of the individuals involved in January 6th. But in this case, we could talk about it in reference to a separatist movement. So this is Trump reposting the content of this man right here. This man was going out there asking for Trump to annex Greenland. And Trump reposted him on his Truth Social app, was saying, hey, look over here. There's people who support us. He's wearing the MAGA hat, et cetera, because Trump has been recently making overtures towards the United States annexing Greenland, while also not dismissing the idea of using military force to do so. And he even indicated that there was support in Greenland for said annexations, that there was this secret support that many of the public, I guess, was unaware of, and including me, in Greenland amongst the public towards leaving Danish control and joining the United States. And when I say leaving Danish control, I don't just mean to become an independent Greenland, which is its own discussion that's happening within, Greenland, but becoming the 51st state in the Union, or maybe like it'd be a territory like Puerto Rico and they'd get a really raw deal. Who knows? I mean, if you want those raw resources, raw deal, right? But either way, in order to sell this image, he reposts this guy who ends up being a drug dealer. He was a drug dealer. And so his message of buy us, buy Greenland, we don't want to be colonized by the Danish government, doesn't seem as reputable, given that this is a guy who has a criminal background, is not like involved deeply in Danish activism, and is now just appearing to ask for this area to be annexed. And there's not somebody who, necessarily you would say, oh, this is a guy who has Denmark's best interest at heart. This isn't the best representative of your movement, should not be a drug smuggler. And then when I say drug smuggler, I mean, he's like, he had like $500,000 confiscated from him. Anyway, that's just one guy though. Who cares? Well, turns out that Donald Trump Jr. went to Greenland in order to like openly signal towards the idea that there was this big movement in Greenland to be annexed by the United States. And it turns out that what they did is he took an American flag, went to a local diner, had his staff go out and gather a bunch of homeless people and others, gave them a meal and a bribe, and then took pictures with them in MAGA hats and posted it online to indicate there was more support for the annexation of Greenland than there really was. As it turns out, sources have told Danish news outlet DR News that the supporters wearing fresh MAGA hats during a visit from Trump's representatives. Let me just put up this image so you guys can see this while I read this out, because I mean, it really is sad once you read these words and you look at this picture. One second. God, this really is pathetic. I'm sorry. I can't get my head wrapped around. Okay. As it turns out, sources have told Danish news outlet DR that the supporters wearing fresh MAGA hats during a visit from Trump's representative Don Jr. Charlie Kirk were homeless and socially disadvantaged people who were bribed with hotel dinners. Several sources tell DR that a portion of the people who appear in the video from Trump's campaign people are homeless and socially disadvantaged, who often find themselves outside the Brugsen and Nuuk, which is located directly opposite of the hotel. Don Jr. and Charlie Kirk described the warm reception from what was described as a group of Greenlandic Trump supporters. They go out, give a guy a sandwich, say, hey, you want a sandwich? Come into this diner. He comes in the diner, he gets the sandwich, put a Trump hat on him, take a picture of him, put him on social media and says, hey, look at our soldier. Look, these are the guys right here. I just want everybody at home to look at these faces. These are the guys who are going to take up Air-15s, 1911s, get some pet bald eagles, and they're going to go in the trenches and fight against the Dutch colonialists. Against the Dutch. The Danish colonialists for American independence. You see that guy next to Don Jr. to his right? The guy who was right. That's actually the Greenlandic George Washington. Right there. It might be hard to believe, but that is the Greenlandic George Washington right there. Oh my goodness. Let me read you Donald Trump Jr.'s message. Oh yeah. Well, sorry. Let me just let me just let me just read it. Greenland loves America and Trump. Incredible people with equally awesome reception. They just want to be able to utilize some of the incredible resources that they have and allow themselves, their country, and their kids to flourish. Why? Okay, to be clear, the only way that this would make sense is if these people want to be annexed. If they're like, they want to utilize their resources, that makes it sound like they want America to take over so America can invest in resource gathering so then they can take advantage of American economic prosperity. So the way he's writing this is as if these guys are really like American independence advocates and they're not just random homeless people. Like that, like in the middle to his right, you've got the George Washington. To his left, I guess you've got like Oliver Hazard Perry. That guy on the right there, that guy in the sweater with a yellow scarf with the keys around his neck. That guy, I imagine is Stephen Decatur, is their version. Stephen Decatur. Oh wait, who's that in the back with the long hair? Is that John Paul Jones? Is that? I'm sorry. I mean, come on. They just get out of here. He gathered a bunch of random homeless people and whoever they could bribe with a sandwich. And then called them a revolution. People talk about color revolutions all the time. Okay, this is a color revolution. Finally, it took us so long to find it. People called the Ukrainians a color revolution. I remember Ben Norton called the revolutionaries in Myanmar color revolutionaries. People are called the protesters in Belarus that, the protesters in Georgia that. People call everything and their mother color protesters now. But here is what colored protesters look like. Congratulations, we found them. We found the colored protesters. Do you think we should stop funding Ukraine to start piling up our arsenal versus walrus hunting Danish? Okay, so my first point is, if you look at the early Russian shoveling of people onto buses and busing them to cities to protest in favor of Russian annexation or being part of Russia, a lot of that was homeless people or poor people or disadvantaged people who have been offered a few rubles in order to do that. A lot of the early people who were working in forests as hooligans or were just straight up working on behalf of the Yanukovych regime, like, for example, a lot of the Tutuski, involved in criminal gangs, or just straight up are the gangs. They were hiring the gangs directly. If you look at Vladimir Putin and his right-hand man Prigozhin, when they say he was his cook, a lot of this is referring to the fact that he, organized criminal enterprise. The fact that he was able to organize so many prisoners from prison, he respected a lot of that prison code because he knew that prison code. Because this is a world that Putin has more than lived in. And so when I see this type of stuff, this triggered me thinking about this in this way, like how much overlay in behavior is the Putinist framework of how he's waged power and how he looks at power versus Trump. That's not to say that they value all the same things or the same person, have done the same things, but just to say that, like, from their spot sitting out, looking out, how much do they end up making the same tracks in the snow? And when it comes to this type of stuff, these types of PR moves, this is 100% the type of stuff they've been doing in Ukraine's Donbass, in Crimea, and in many occupied territories for a very long time. That's not to say that there's no genuineness around it. That's not to say there's nobody in Greenland who really wants to be annexed by the United States. But the phoniness around a lot of the propaganda, it matches. And the use of disadvantaged people for propaganda, it absolutely matches. Okay, so that's the first thing. When it comes to creating an alternative reality off of state TV, haven't been able to do that off of NPR yet, or PBS. Even though this term that there has been a lot of talk of targeting funding the NPR, funding of PBS, and going after the press to make them more fair. We've already seen Trump going after and suing a pollster for giving him bad poll numbers. We saw that lawsuit with the news organization, you know, where he's awarded $15 million, even though lawyers said that he could have won that lawsuit
CJP
with
has
ABC.
donated $5. Trump's even more based than Putin. Soy Vlad spent years recruiting a bunch of Ukrainian Russians to be fifth columnists. Apparently Trump just needs a few days.
A box of red hats. He's so much for the $5. I appreciate that. Trump has had a long confrontational relationship with the press that goes past the normal confrontational nature you would see between the president and the press, in a way that shows the president questioning First Amendment rights, whether it being him talking about opening up the libel laws so he can go after the press more openly, whether it be his direct challenging of the First Amendment when it comes to burning the flag for kind of this nationalistic fervor, or just him threatening different members of the press at different points. When he doesn't believe the executive should really be held to the same law and standards as the rest of the country, his legal team made that argument before the Supreme Court. He believes it. He believes the president, and he said this on many occasions, should be held above because the president has to be able to, and I quote, do his job. That idea of an executive, of somebody up in charge in the big seat that is above the legal system and is not going to get trounced by the checks and balances while he is trying to do the work, which sometimes is dirty. This is something that I would 100% imagine to hear over in the Kremlin or out of the mouth of Donald Trump, since he does not believe he should be able to be found accountable for his actions while in office. Probably not while out of office either, but especially while not in office. And so that was something that he argued about quite a lot, and I imagine he'd find a lot of overlap with. But it's not just that. I would say that another way of looking at the world, just generally speaking, that really scares me, is national sovereignty. While Trump is, and other previous U.S. presidents, using the AUMF and other sometimes even questionable stretches of constitutional law in order to go into and violate the sovereignty of other countries is nothing new. A complete rejection of the fact that another country should even have sovereignty based off of like whether it be just like some historical grievance or just like a blatant negotiating tactic because they're in our neck of the woods. This is the type of stuff that, while it's not completely new to the United States, it being this blatant and open and declared and this quick and rapid normalization of it within the Republican Party is not something you would have expected to see within probably the last 100 years. The stuff I've seen from the Foreign Affairs Committee talking about like the taming of the West when talking about the native tribes as of late, after he started talking about making Canada the 51st state, the Panama Canal the 52nd, Greenland the 53rd, all of this talk about trampling on the sovereignty of all these countries. In any case, whether it's about Canada and the use of economic force, or the more scary examples of the threatening of a Just Cause 2 operation in Panama, the threat of military force there, or in Greenland because of national security priorities, and then completely inventing some popular movement in Greenland to be annexed by the United States, and a blood oath, a type of blood commitment in Panama through the thousands of Americans, construction workers and soldiers who died of malaria, because a bunch of people died 100 years ago of malaria in the Panama Canal area. Now we have a forever and always contract to that land, no matter what the locals want, even though we already settled this more than 50 years ago, when Jimmy Carter gave back the Panama Canal for $1. And Jimmy Carter just dies, and one of the first things Trump does while going into office is tries to rip up that part of his legacy, saying, no, we should have gotten more for that. No, we should have gotten paid more for that. And not even like going into the idea of like, well, let's talk about a future deal. Well, let's talk about future deal making, just immediately threatening the idea that actually your sovereignty, we give you sovereignty, or you are allowed to have sovereignty insofar as you are pleasing us at every particular moment. that the sovereignty of Panama, the sovereignty of Canada, the sovereignty of Greenland, all these people, immediately once they're within the bullseye of our national security interests, we will crush them in every way, and we'll immediately come out and say, we will crush you unless you submit. You don't come in and negotiate like, hey, we'll give you this much money for us to be able to use this port, or we'll make a deal with you this way around trade arrangements. And if you talk to people in Greenland, you know what they say? You know what the MPs from Greenland say? They say they're willing to make a deal on resources. They're willing to make a deal on trade. They're willing to make a deal on trade from Greenland to Asia once the ice caps continue to melt. They're willing to make a deal on copper, on lithium, on cobalt, on aluminum. They're willing to make a deal on all this stuff. It's just Trump has to come out with the bat swinging and make clear to everyone that the sovereignty of these states do not matter, and it's not always just about, in I think my mind, negotiating tactics. And even if it is, he's still indicating that like the sovereignty of the state doesn't matter at all, as long as you can use the buzzwords like national security interests, which I mean, very Putinist. It's not just an indication that he's willing to ignore the sovereignties of these countries. I also think that there is a certain amount of show of force and standard he wants to set for the relationship between the United States and these other countries. The United States is the big dog. The United States tells you what to do. You're in our sphere of interests. Act like it. Act like it. I do think that is something he wants to set. I think both, not only does he want to set that standard because then it would be easier to just tell these other countries what to do, even if it's going to be negative with the civilian populations, we can leer over them, or economic and military dominance. And even though I think this is going to have detrimental soft power implications for the United States, even if it doesn't have very likely diplomatic negative implications for the United States, I do think there's also a personal side of it. I think Trump gets off on calling Justin Trudeau the 51st governor of the union in charge of the 51st state. I think he gets off on talking down to him. I think he gets off on displaying the power that's at his disposal. And now that he has the House, now that he has the Senate, now that he has the Supreme Court, might be able to double down on the Supreme Court, and he has all of this. He has the executive branch for at least the next 2 years. For at least the next 2 years. Now that he has this, he wants to helicopter, man. To put it bluntly and to put it crudely, he wants to go out in public and helicopter. And what better way to helicopter than to do it in your own backyard? Do it on grievances that you had before, but you weren't able to get across, because the Panama issue is not new. You know, a lot of these trade issues and stuff with Canada are not new, but the Panama issue and the Greenland issue are particularly not new. He talked about the fact that he was not happy about why Panama was given back for $1, and that we didn't have like free, unadulterated access and all these rights over Panama Canal. This conflict over the United States possibly annexing Greenland is not new. It just, last time Trump had managers around him who were like the babysitters. Now he doesn't have the babysitters. In fact, while last time the adults in the room was a selling point of Trump going in there, it was something that people said to calm people down. Now, the fact that he doesn't have babysitters and he doesn't have adults in the room is a selling point for Trump. It's a selling point. What was previously something that was used to calm people down is now something that's been completely turned on its head and then turned into a selling point. Make a flaw into a feature. So, I mean, for me, it's the creation of the alternate reality. It's the work with the criminality element. It is the disregarding of state sovereignty. It is the belief in a above all executive that's completely independent and above the law, above the Constitution, above everything else. I think it is the hostile relationship with the free and independent press, which might not always be believed that should be particularly free and independent. I believe it is the open threat of annexation, off of like historical national security blood oaths. I mean, the type of stuff that Trump was saying about Panama, about all of our boys that died in Panama and the historic clay of the United States. This is the type of stuff you'd hear Vladimir Putin talk about in relation to Crimea, about how Catherine the Great soldiers and all these Russians died fighting for Crimea, and they deserve to have it and under their control because of all these people that died. And not only because of all these people that died, but it was historical Russian clay because it's part of the historic Russian civilization, et cetera, et cetera. Like a lot of this, like there's a lot of overlap here. Maybe not 100%. When it, you know, you're not going to hear Trump say the like the Kievan Rusin equivalent of the United States, but like at least like you can find like 80% overlap in these areas. While this is not really that relevant for the people who live in near the Panama Canal today, or the benefits that the people of Panama are going to see, Panamanians today, from the Panama Canal, it is relevant to Donald Trump's view, his historical perspective of the world. It's not something, you know, all those dead people, it's not something that really gets Americans hot and bothered right now, but give a little bit of time, give Trump some, you know, effort in his ability to create a song and dance about all these brave Americans who died out in the woods, and all of a sudden you might start to feel that there's quite a few Americans who seem to care about, you know, the sacrificial malaria lamb that was American soldiers in Panama helping to build empire in the early to mid 19th century. Mid to late 19th century, actually. Is this foreshadowing? Don't ask me.